Welcome to the Gritty Podcast, folks. I am your host, Brian Call, and today I am joined with Mark Livesey with Treeline Academy, and we are talking about the art of finding elk with e-scouting.
Our art of finding elk series.
Yes, and this is what, our fourth?
This is the fourth in the series.
Fourth episode. We're going to talk today about, we're going to basically review the tools of the trade for e-scouting.
Yeah.
And we've talked about a little bit as we've moved on, but I think what I want to impress upon people today is what tools are available and why they matter, why each one is a little bit different and why they matter. I suppose people should leave this episode going, I had no idea that that was possible with this tool, and I should learn how to do that through Mark's class.
I think I want to accomplish that, and I also want to accomplish that no matter which one you like or which one you think is the best, it's not the best at everything.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm just telling you straight up. I've been doing this for 30 years. I love OnX. Everybody's like, man, you're so down on OnX. I'm like, there are a couple things I don't like about OnX, but there's a lot of things I love about OnX. Everybody's like, you're always Gaia. Gaia has a lot to it. If you're a guy that doesn't want a lot of distraction, or to manage a bunch of layers, or you don't really feel like you want that level of detail, then OnX is great. It's got 3 views. Mm-hmm. It's got a topo, a hybrid, and a satellite view or aerial photo. Mm-hmm. That's easy. It's click, click, click. But you want to look at 50 different layers, 7 different topo maps, 5 different aerial photo views, then you want to use Gaia.
Yeah.
But that's not for everybody. And there's places you go and hunts you're on that you don't need 5 aerial photo views.
Yeah.
So, and I'm not trying to say, oh, you need to spend $400 on platforms either. That's not what I'm saying either. I just want to kind of I think I want to open people's eyes, or try to open people's eyes to the idea that don't become so one-dimensional. Don't become so invested in one because you're emotionally connected to it. It's like guns. When you hear somebody like, I'm going to call him out, Ryan Avery with rocks, like, cracks me up the way he talks about the 6.5 Creedmoor all the time.
Yeah.
He just makes fun of it constantly.
Yeah.
Because he's a gun nut. Uh-huh. But I'm telling you right now, I know nothing about the 6.5, but it is probably really an amazing gun. It's just Ryan has an attitude about it.
Right.
So, but I find when you talk about backpacks, okay, you got guys that are in the camp of,
I don't like getting into backpack brands.
Yes. Because it's like a cult, right?
Yeah, like I want to stay away.
So, but you can get into, I get hate on this too. I got to be careful about this too, because OnX people are, OnX is,
yeah.
How dare you? And Gaia people are like, well, it is the only way to go. Guys, it's not. It's a tool. It's like working on your car. Mm-hmm. I mentioned this earlier when we were off air. It's like if you're going to change the brakes in your car and you're only going to use a screwdriver, it's not going to go well.
Right.
And I think when it comes to e-scouting, and when I say that, when you're doing advanced e-scouting, when you're really getting in the weeds and you really want to break down an area and you really, really, really want to identify all of the features, you have to be open your mind to using some multiple tools in my mind. Yeah. So that's kind of what I hope to accomplish.
We leveraged Gaia a lot. And what was funny,
he didn't even know about Gaia until I told him about it.
Yeah.
And now he's passing it on to you.
Yeah. So Lampers is out there, and we have OnX. That sucker doesn't talk. He doesn't tell me he's got Gaia. And he's like figuring things out. And I'm like, how'd you know that? How'd you know that there was a turn here and there? I'm not seeing it on this map. He's like, yeah, we don't want to do that because this, and this. And I'm like, well, what are you looking at? Because my what's going on here? And he's like, oh yeah, I've got this thing. Mark gave me Gaia. He told me how to use it. And I'm looking at it. I'm like, oh my gosh, look at those layers. Look at that information.
This is non-tech Lampers.
I should have I needed this years ago. And we were using that every day to navigate. This is in the backcountry. This isn't us doing it at home either.
So what you're talking about here, let's get to the detail on that.
Okay.
I'm going to guess, but I'm guessing what you're talking about, correct me if I'm wrong, is you're trying to use the topographic layer within X, and he was using the USGS 7.5
Downloaded.
minute actual vector image of the actual topographic map.
Correct.
So the contour intervals were 20 feet.
Totally usable.
And versus a summary version or a hybrid version. And guys, there's reasons to use both.
Right.
But if you're navigating in super, super steep country and you're needing to find the right way to get up a certain rock slides, and there's no better way than the raw USGS topographic map in my mind. It's the most detail of contour intervals that you can get.
No, that's exactly what we were doing. And OnX didn't tell us those things. You had to go and experience it to see it. And that's not good.
Well,
that's a 10-mile, route just to get cliffed out.
Yeah.
Or to have a dangerous descent, where if we go this route, it's still 10 miles, but, we can navigate that and get through the pass.
Well, since we mentioned that, there's another little tool. I'll throw one more little tip out there. So Gaia also, in addition to the 7.5, you can turn on the Cal Topo. So Cal Topo, I don't know if you guys, many people know, but caltopo.com, another tip, you can go look at the slope degree. Okay. It'll, in shades of color from yellow to, I think, deep purple, if I'm recalling, it goes from 20 degrees to whatever, cliff. But it's color coded. Well, Gaia has that layer built into the system. So you can turn on the color coding of the slope degree and it gives you a visual reference. You guys probably really love this. And you can pick your path where there's no yellow. Is basically what I'm saying. Because once it gets yellow, it's steep. So it highlights all the topography by color based on the steepness. Am I making sense?
Yeah, totally makes sense.
So you can turn that layer on, take a quick look, and you can turn that layer off. So not only can you look at the detailed contour lines, but now you also, with Gaia, can look at the color.
Yeah.
And gives you kind of a picture. Because let's say you're looking at a long ridge, okay? Sometimes it's hard to look at the actual contour lines and really pick out the best spot.
Yeah.
But if you popped on the color and you saw this one spot where there's no yellow, you're like, well, this is it. This is the way we're going up. Then you would switch to the aerial photo view, see what kind of timber situation you got, and see if it, you'd want to compare the two. But the point is, that's just one example in what you were talking about, how you could go one more step further with Gaia other than just looking at the contour lines. You could add color as well.
Yeah. We used it a lot on some of our rafting hunts because we needed to know what parts of the river were too steep to climb out of, or where there was, because the side walls can trap you inside of a chute. And then you hit like a class 5 rapid, in a little tiny raft. There is that, right? So
I saw your videos. Your paddling skills have gotten better. But the first one I saw was,
oh, come on.
You were looking a little nervous.
I just power. I don't have any finesse in my rafting skills. I'm quite confident in my swimming ability. But honestly, we hit some spots that were scary. But again, what we're trying to do is see, okay, when do we have to get out of the water and portage the boats and our packs and everything, and when can we get back in? And it's a combination of getting trapped in a canyon of water in some of these mountain areas, and the rapids that you might hit in that canyon.
The steepness of the drop.
The drop, right? Yeah. So we were looking at those drops to see in so many feet how much drop you have, to see if there was rapids there that were just too much to handle. And then you can look at the whitewater and some of the Google mapping and stuff.
See, it's what you just said. Let's stop right there. Because if you only used a hunt platform, Gaia included, Gaia, OnX guys, and Gaia, and even Basemap, they only have the aerial photo views available to a certain ratio. Okay. I don't know what it is, the number, but let's just call it 15. Well, with Google Earth, you might be able to get to 3 or 4 more steps of better resolution is what I'm saying. Google Earth has better resolution at its maximum zoomed in capabilities than all of the hunt platforms in general. Now, I'm not saying every once in a while you'll get an updated image in OnX or an updated image in Google Earth, but for the most part, for your example, you're better off to be using Google Earth before you go in the field to analyze the rapids than you are standing on the bank trying to use some
tool, right?
Because when you download OnX, even at its maximum, I think 5 miles per grid, it's still not at the resolution. How do you
deal with spring runoff, waters or summer waters versus, because we might float it in July and it's going to be a lot different than when we float it in September.
Okay, perfect. Great question. Here's what you would do. Forget OnX. Forget Gaia, because you got one image. You've got one aerial photo image, and you have no idea what time of year that photo was taken.
Right.
Now, you kind of do. If there's snow on the ground, it's probably not. Well,
it's probably not.
Well, it might be
Depends
spring.
on the elevation.
Yeah. So, but my point is, there's no date. When you open up OnX or Gaia, I always say OnX, but I'm across the board, base map included, GOHUNT.com included. You don't know what date you're looking at. You're just looking at aerial photo.
Yeah.
So when you switch to Google Earth, what I would do if I was you guys is use the historical timeline slider, slide back to an image that is in the month that you're needing. Now, you won't be able to find it in every case, but I've found that there's at least 10 or 15 historical images for almost every place. There's at least that many.
Yeah.
Now, as you slide back historically, guys,
your images won't be as good.
They won't be as good, but they're still going to be pretty good.
Yeah.
You can evaluate whitewater with them. So drag back and look at the dates on
what does
the
it look
image.
like in May.
And guys don't, they know about that historical slider. A lot of people know about it, but they don't use it enough. Yeah. I use it, when it comes to picking out aspen trees, I love to hunt elk in aspen groves. Sometimes they're hard to pick out.
Yeah.
But I use the slider until I hit October
and they pop.
And I see the yellow.
Yeah.
It's a great look. Yeah. And then I'll draw a polygon around. I'm like, look at this aspen patch right here. Then I'll go back up to the high resolution, which might be June.
Yep.
When you can kind of tell if you get good with the color of green, like a real bright green usually gives you a deciduous tree, some type of deciduous like aspens, but not always. Yeah. So anyway, using that slider is not only for water, not only for trees, but for burn analysis, beetle kill, I use that slider a lot. When I say slider, I mean the timeline. Yeah. People call it different things. The timeline slider or the historical imagery slider. So if I was you guys, I'd slide back to June and start scanning through and looking at the rivers in June.
Yeah.
Now that's not
so
going to be
valuable.
perfect.
Same with snow.
It's not going to be perfect because melt runoff is not always runoff.
It changes.
But it's going to give you some rapid ideas.
Yeah.
And you can at least have marks, at least drop pins.
Well, there are times where it's like, is this river even deep enough to float?
Yeah.
In let's say September or August,
right?
It just isn't deep enough, right. And you'll be walking like for miles in the water. And there's other times where it can change within 1 week's time.
Yeah.
And being able to look at it when it has major runoff and before the snow melts to that level, and then seeing what hunts are available pre-runoff.
So bear season, I know this is more elk, but for bear season, I'm really paying attention to those because even the smallest of drainages get wild.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
So when you're glassing across a canyon, which usually you are bear hunting, you need to understand what's below you. And even the smallest of small can get kind of dangerous.
It was like churning, devilish,
especially
dark
when you get
brown.
over there and shoot one.
It's like the Amazon River raging.
And guys, there's nothing more dangerous. And I've seen you crossing these logs that are 25 feet above this.
Yeah.
So anyway, water analysis is a tool that definitely don't forget about the slider.
Okay. Yeah, that's genius. I mean, you can tell. I've used these maps where you go back and you can tell what time of year those images are taken, and I'm trying to match up those images to the time frame, but I need to go back and.
Well, let me give you an example. You said you want to talk about some examples. Here's an example. When I did the zones of pressure, which we just talked about, module, when I started recording it. So the way the course works is I have part one. In most modules, I've got part one, which is theory and discussion. I kind of go through it all, talk about it. I've got notes, bullet points, all in the course of the theory. And then I go to part 2, which is real examples using Google Earth, using OnX, using Gaia, step-by-step processes. So I try to separate the theory from the practical. Okay. So that's kind of the way I've done it. I don't know if that's the best way, but that's the way it is. But when I was working on the zones of pressure, when I started looking at access points, you remember I was talking about looking at trail usage, evaluating. I'm big on that. One of the other things I'm big at is I talk about is analyzing access points. How busy are they? Okay. Everybody's like, well, how do you know? Use Google Earth.
Yeah.
If it looks like a Walmart parking lot, then you know it's going to be busy. So what I'm trying to get to here is when I did that, I used every tool. Okay. So for example, I've got Trailhead X. And this might blow people's minds. When I looked at it in OnX, Trailhead X, it had a white car there. Okay. Great. When I looked at it in Gaia, there was 2 cars there. I'm like, that's weird. They're using 2 different kinds of imagery. When I looked at Base Map, there was no cars there. When I looked at GOHUNT, there were 10 cars there. Same trailhead. When I looked at Google Earth, there was a horse trailer there. I'm not wanting, this is just wanting, that's what got my attention. That's when I finally realized that these hunt platforms are all getting their imagery from different sources.
Different satellites.
Different satellites and different companies. That's when I started researching more. I found out that Google Earth does not do their own imagery. I always thought they did. They buy it just like everybody else. So and then I realized there's a lot of sources for aerial photo imagery.
Okay.
Different satellites, planes. There's different ways to get aerial photos. So I looked at one trailhead, Brian, and had 5 different views.
Right.
Well, that showed me right there, there's a lot of power in using multiple tools.
Yeah.
For different things. So when it came to looking at fires and beetle kills, you're looking at different dates. And those are 2 elk finding features that the dates are really important. Is the timber standing? Is it on the ground? Is it a recent beetle kill? Is it an old beetle kill? Is the fire, is the timber still up or is the timber starting to fall? Those are really important things when you're evaluating those features. And if you're only using a platform when you have no date, you don't know what you're looking at.
Yep.
Are you looking at recent, old, 10 years old? And the other thing that I'll mention real quick is how many times have you pulled up? Let me just say, since I say OnX all the time, I'm going to have to say OnX again because I'm going to throw them under. This is the one, my pet peeve with OnX. How many times in OnX have you pulled up a snow layer in OnX? Ticks you off. When you pull up the aerial photo view in OnX and it's snow on the ground, I hate it.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Don't it drive you crazy? I want to see the green. I want to see it.
Or it's just covered in clouds.
Well, that happens sometimes, yeah. But
it drives me nuts. I'll be sitting there. Some dude will have OnX. I'll have OnX. I'll have downloaded the maps. We're sitting side by side in the same hunt location. Mine's covered in clouds. I can't see diddly squat. And his is clear as a bell.
You know why
from
that
a different date period.
No, it's because of the resolution you downloaded. It's the same imagery, but if you say do the 150-mile view or the 10-mile view or the 5-mile view, because if you look at Google Earth or any of these, when you zoom in, okay, you'll notice that a lot of times the image will actually change. So when you're zooming in, you're looking, and boom, all of a sudden the whole image will change. It'll go from green to brown.
Yeah. It's
because when they buy the imagery, they're getting different dates for different zoom levels.
Right.
And when they piece them together, it makes it, I don't know if I'm technically saying this right, but basically when you zoom in, not all the time, but in some cases, the imagery will change. Okay.
Well, I was sitting there going, this is useless. It's all covered in clouds. I cannot.
You downloaded X zoom level and he downloaded a different zoom
level. I'm screwed because I'm already out there.
That's right.
And now I can't get any views. I can't even see there's a spot that's okay, but this part is covered in First, I couldn't tell what it was, Mark. I was like, how come I can't?
You thought it was blurry or something?
Yeah, it was like, what the heck? And it took me a while, and I realized it looked like his was from the summertime, though, and mine was from the winter.
Well, it's because they change. I'm telling you. So even
and I wonder, did I not run an update on my OnX?
Well, that's possible too. I guess that is possible too. I don't know I don't know how they run their image servers. I'm not trying to imply that I do, but I'm just telling you, when you pull up OnX and you get the snow layer and you start wanting to kick the ground, which I do, I immediately switch right over to Gaia. Boom, I got a nice green, or vice versa. I'm not trying to throw one or the other. I never go on a hunt, Brian, never, without 2 systems.
Yeah.
Now, I do it more for redundancy and protection because I don't want to get out there and have a problem. I've had problems.
Yeah.
And I want to back up. So I'm not saying you have to do that, but these things are not very expensive. Let's
but
be
after
honest.
just coming across the advantages of having one to contrast against the other on all our spring bear hunts, we were leveraging.
You're going to start running too.
I was like, man, it's so nice to have this one when this one's not working out, or when
That's
this
right.
one's not giving
Or
me
if
the
view's
look I
not giving you
want.
what you want. So I run both all the time, every hunt. So my process is once I get my hunt area completely done, I download it to my phone, my device, in both platforms that I'm going to use.
Yep.
And I'll cycle. I use Basemap, Onyx. I'm using Basemap because I'm trying to be incorporated into the course. There's some good things in Basemap. It has some limitations too. But so what I'm trying to get to here, guys, is the imagery is not the same. Don't think it is, because it is not.
Yeah.
It is erratic. I have seen imagery in Gaia and Onyx that are 15 years difference. That's a big difference. Now, in some cases, when you're looking for meadows and things, it's not a big deal.
Right.
But when you're looking at fires and beetle kills and new growth, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
15 years on a log out,
Yeah.
15 years could turn it into reap. I mean, it could be,
Right.
you can't even walk through it.
Right.
It looks clear.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And I felt a bear hunt, and I've fallen victim to it. I've looked only in one a couple of times. I'm like, I'm going to go up there. I'm going to glass for bears. And I get up there, and the crap is 3.5 feet tall.
That's how Prince of Wales Island is. You know,
It grows so fast.
It grows so fast that, you know, you can look at something and go, oh, I'm going to do that. You can hunt there and come back a year later, and you're not going to see a bear. It's prime for bear hunting that year. The next year, the very next year, you're not going to see a bear in that. It's too thick, too tall.
You're never going to avoid 100%, Brian, as I'm saying. But by using these multiple tools and double checking.
Yeah.
So, for example, if you would have downloaded I'm not trying to pick on you here, but if you'd have downloaded that and ran through it, you'd probably notice the clouds before you ever hit the field.
No, I was in a hurry, and I was
You just downloaded it and ran.
I hit download, and I was offline.
In the car.
I was off. I wasn't offline, and so I was zooming into whatever level I needed to, and then I got back there, and again, in my defense, we were 25 miles from our original spot.
Don't start.
And so when I have a 5-mile radius and a 10-mile radius, and now we just hiked all the way out of my radius, I'm like, son of a gun. But
so the imagery, and that was an eye opener to me, Brian. I didn't realize when I started doing even the course, that the imagery was so radically different between all the platforms and Google Earth.
So you covered this in the class, though, and
in pretty deep detail, maybe too much detail. So let's close out real quick with Google Earth because I want to give out a couple good tips.
Okay.
I want to say right now, if you're doing e-scouting on a high level, you must be using Google Earth. You just got to. It's that good at that many things. What most people do with Google Earth is they go to googleearth.com, not really googleearth.com, wherever you get Google Earth, and they download it to their computer and they turn it on, and that's the end of it, right?
Yeah.
They do aerial photo, they look at it, and they get an idea. Then they jump over to Onyx or whatever, and they do
drop a waypoint.
Drop a waypoint and whatever. Google Earth, the power of Google Earth is not in the program. It's in the add-ons that you can do to Google Earth. Okay. So Google Earth works on this keyhole markup language, which is KML. That's what it used to be called before it was called Google Earth, but it's called KML files. So everything, not everything, but lots of the work in Google Earth is based on these KML files. You can download KML files for a variety of things that you probably didn't even have a clue existed. I'm just going to cover a couple. The number one question I got after elk hunting this year, for some reason, I think it was because my number one state of members in my course is Colorado, is the number one state. Oregon and Washington are pretty close. But in Colorado, the cattle grazing is a big deal.
Right.
And everybody's like, I ran into cattle, Mark. How is there a way that you can tell? I'm like, yeah, in Google Earth. They're like, what? There's a layer for cattle allotments. You can download the KML file for cattle allotments, and it puts a polygon in every single permitted allotment in the United States. It tells you what livestock
So that's like
is,
a zone of pressure.
kind of.
Right? Like,
Well, not really. Depends on when they're grazing. Maybe they're not grazing that year. Maybe they're on a rotation. But it tells you what livestock they're grazing. More importantly, who's got the permit. You can contact them.
Okay.
It tells you the agency that gave the permit, which part of the national forest, so you know who to call.
Yeah.
To double check to see.
Right.
But it's a really powerful tool.
Yeah.
But it doesn't come with Google Earth when you download. You got to install the file. So, but it's complicated. It's not complicated. But there's a process to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we talk about that. But the last one I'm going to get tip is fires. This is what ticks me. All of the hunt platforms do not go back. The oldest one, I'm not going to try to pick on any. The oldest is about 2000. Okay. Between Gaia, Onyx, Basemap, GOHUNT. About the furthest you can go back is the year 2000. Well, there was a lot of fires that happened prior to 2000, but they're not going to show up on your platforms. With Google Earth, if you download the shape file for fires, which we talk about, you can go back into the 80s.
Really?
It's so powerful. There are so many fire areas that I have found that are really old, that have regrowth, and also it'll save you. Those old fires sometimes impenetrable.
Ah, right.
I mean, because everything's on the ground, but you don't see them they look like a meadow in OnX. But if you zoom in close, it looks like matchsticks. But if you don't take the time to zoom in, there's no other way to know it's a fire. It looks like it's open hillside. It looks like you can glass. Looks beautiful. It looks beautiful. Green, because it's so old. It's the 80s that there's not a single tree standing now, hardly. Very few. But in trees. But in Google Earth, it's got everything from the 80s to current. Okay. It's amazing. So
when you have areas that you like, you then go and you
double check, make sure. Or even when you're flying around, you can turn it on, and there's a way in Google Earth to set the fires and use a random shading color so that it will shade the fires in different colors of red or yellow, so that you can tell the ages. But that's just interesting. I kind of thought everybody knew Google Earth had that.
Yeah, no.
But they don't. So fires, cattle, motor vehicle use, private land, wilderness, all this stuff is available. There are files available. You got to know where to get them, how to download them, and how to install them.
Yeah.
And so we go through that too. Google Earth is probably the most underutilized tool nowadays. It used to be the go-to.
Well, with OnX and the marketing and the power that's in the tool, and because it's on your phone and you're using it all the time. It's too easy to jump to. Yeah, people no longer get on a desktop and mess around with an app like with a Google Earth kind of situation, but we use it extensively. Ryan uses it a lot.
Yeah, it's a more powerful tool, especially for glassing. I don't want to get too far, but I know we're going to do a glassing segment. But the power in Google Earth for analyzing glassing spots, there's one thing I know you're not doing because I know Ryan's not doing it. We're going to talk about that in the glassing. I told him about it this week. And, but there's an awesome tool in Google Earth when it comes to glassing that I've known it for a while, but I didn't know it that long. I'm a little embarrassed to say it wasn't that long ago that I figured it out. And, but it is a freaking gold mine.
Really?
In KUIU country, particularly. Or any country for that matter, but it really shines in those areas that have the kind of quagmires of ridges. The cuts, it's hard to tell in that kind of country what you can see and what you can't see from one spot.
Yeah.
And so that kind of demystifies some of that. But anyway, so that's some of the tools in the tools of the trade. So, okay.
Sweet. So do we want to jump ahead to the glassing one? Now that I'm curious, or next week, do we cover meadows and feeding zones?
Let's do that next week.
Meadows and feeding zones?
Yeah.
Okay. We'll stick to that pathway. So
don't jump ahead. See, that's what people are doing in my course. We talked about that earlier. They're like, glassing. We'll skip 24 modules.
I like, so we got meadows and feeding zones, and then the week following that, we're going to cover benches and slopes. I'm very keen on both of those to learn more about both of those.
Well, now we're getting into the elk up to this point, we've been talking about theories and technologies,
tools,
which are important.
Laying a foundation.
Really a foundation.
Yeah.
But everybody was always on me the question, well, when are we going to talk about
finding
how
out?
To find out? What do you look for? Well, that comes, but you kind of got to set up the toolbox.
Yeah.
So that you're able to better evaluate for these features
using
the tools.
Right.
So anyway,
so empowering, for the average Joe who's going to come out west, and so often they're like, I don't even know where to begin.
I know
and people ask us all the time. One of the number one questions on every film I produce is, where was it? What unit? What state?
Yeah.
And I wish we don't answer that question.
Yeah, sure.
We don't answer it generally, because the point of it is what we're trying to demonstrate is, well, hell, we pick a spot on a map and we go there and kill, because there's so much access to public land that's out there, and there's so many great animals everywhere. It's more about how you do it, not and where matters, but that's part of this whole discussion. All of this scouting and planning. Well, you can just go up to, like, let's say Idaho, and you're like, well, this is an over-the-counter tag. This is an elk. There's all these zones. I don't know, and you pick one. Then you're like, well, now let's go into the system and see and follow your course, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm almost willing to say, if it's an elk hunting unit and there's elk there,
yeah.
If you follow a system of not getting stuck on one feature, okay, that's the thing. Don't get stuck on north slopes. Don't get stuck on fires. Don't get stuck on beetle kills, drainages, benches, slope degrees. Don't get all wrapped up in one or two or three, and you keep a 360 view. Your odds of finding elk, even in those low populated elk areas, is going to be relatively high if you don't get tunnel vision,
right?
In my opinion. That's just my humble 55-year-old opinion.
I agree, and I feel like having hunted, like I said, when it comes to bears, like everything that we've done the last few years, Lampers and I, and Lampers has done this his whole life, but it's all very public land general tags. These are not special tags. They're no-point draws over the counter. You buy them at a gas station, or they're no-point draws, or they take 1 point. You can get that tag every other year, or it's a flat-out random-ass drawing that you like in Idaho, there's no points. Yeah. You just
New
Mexico, you just throw in your hat and you get it. And my feelings are, you pretty much give me any spot. Let me use these tools. Well, I'm going to find animals.
I talked to Ryan, and I've talked a lot about it, because this will be the third year at the summit, which we'll throw a plug in for that, I guess, since you guys are buddies.
Yeah.
But that weekend is probably the most empowering elk hunting weekend you can participate in.
Yeah.
And it's not because of the East guys. It's the network.
It's the whole package.
Oh, man. It's just really amazing. Well, you were there this last year. It's really great. He has done a great job with that. But we talk about this a lot. And I'm like, Ryan does not realize, or even I was telling him, I said, you don't realize how you're breaking down an area. Because I can hear you talk about, well, we just plan to hunt till this day here, and then we plan to move here.
Right.
That's you got to catch the subtlety of that.
Yeah.
And when I talk about all these elk finding features, I don't think Ryan even realizes that when he looks at an area, he's doing it subliminally, just in his brain. He's like processing the slopes, where it's located, the isolation of it, even the angle of the sun for the morning glassing, the evening glassing. I talk about that a lot. Right. He doesn't even realize that he's even doing it.
No.
Because it's all the experience. And I think what the course
see that with other guides too, like Dustin Rowe.
They're like, "Well, you just do this." I'm like, "Well, why?"
No. Yeah,
they just know.
Ryan did it with food early on when I would probe him about food and backcountry meals, and his nutrition in the backcountry. And I had my techniques and things I gleaned from other hunters, and some of them are great backpackers, excellent ones. But I'm asking Ryan because he has his way of doing things, and he was like, "Well, I just do this." And I'm like, but how many calories is that? I don't know. How much macronutrients is that? Like how much fat, how much carbs, how much protein? I don't know. What are your antioxidants? What's this? What's that? How many electrolytes? I don't know. These are what I like to eat each day. And he'd been doing it so long, he just knows this works for me.
That's the thing.
This is it. And I'm like, yeah, but like, what are how many calories is that? No clue whatsoever. So I had to like write it all down, do the math, do the macronutrient ratios, figure out the calories, and kind of compare it to my stack and another guy's stack and another guy's stack, you know, and start to go, okay. And then everything's different. Like some of the spicy foods that he would eat, I would crush me if I ate that. I ain't eating that. That'll kill me. And then foods that I eat, Ryan can't thrive on. You know, there's certain things that Ryan's sensitive to that if he eats aren't great for him either. And I'm not that way. And so we're able to, but he, again, it's something so instinctive that he doesn't know to teach it.
Well, and that really was a challenge. When I decided to do this course, I had to really go back and almost re-educate myself on why would I pick this place.
It's funny because when I first
break it down to that stupid littlest detail, like maybe because the road looked like this, or maybe because this, or I didn't realize why I was picking. But once I started thinking about it and making notes and writing it down, it started just coming.
Right.
But I think that it took me a lot of time to figure out how to get it out of my head into paper.
There's so much content here too that to have it in the form of a course online, it's really powerful.
Well, I started out on YouTube. I don't know if I remember out posting 2-hour videos.
Yeah.
And I'm like, these are ridiculous, like long. Nobody's going to watch these things. And people were messaging me like, I've watched it 3 times. I'm like, you've watched a 2-hour video on e-scouting. Do you not have any life at all?
Right.
But what it showed me though, Ryan, was people are craving the detail. They don't want just, one of the best compliments I get about the course is, Mark, I just can't believe the detail, how little you step through it. Even though some of you are like, okay, I know that. Oh, I didn't know that little thing.
No, when you have someone like Ryan go, whoa, I learned so much from this, you know that it's going into some detail.
Well, I appreciate that. But I think it's more of the fact that I just try not to leave any stone unturned. I try to address everything. And it can get long. This is not something you're going to do in 2 or 3 days. I'm telling you, it's 30 hours almost.
Yeah.
And but it's something you can work through.
Yeah.
And that's the whole reason I decided to do the 2-year membership.
Yeah.
Everybody's like, Mark, that's the dumbest business decision you've ever made. I'm like, maybe so, but I know myself.
Yeah.
I want 2 years with something before I know that, especially when it comes to elk hunting.
Yeah.
There's a lot of factors here. I mean, I want to make sure everybody that had 2 full seasons to digest and work the plans and maybe come back to it and revisit some modules or some sections and stuff. So anyway, I decided to do that really early on. And I think people are pretty happy with that part of it.
Yeah, I think so. I think that, like I said, I think this is so empowering because there's so many tags and hunts that are available, and it's so intimidating to just come here. Literally, when 3 or 4 years ago, I tell guys from back east, pick a spot, grab a tag, go out, and they're like, yeah, but I don't want to waste 7 days, and what if I don't see anything?
Dude, when you're elk hunting, you're never wasting days.
And I'm like, I'm telling you guys, having spent some time in Baltimore and PA and having spent some time in some denser city populations out east and seeing living there and seeing there's no public land, you know, and I'm like, you don't fathom how much public land we have out west, and that you literally can just get it at the gas station as you roll into town and then like go out and hike a few miles and elk are out there. Yeah. You know, now I've done hunts like that where I don't see an elk for 6 days in a row.
Still better than not elk hunting.
Yeah, true. But it is if you have expectations of it and they're dashed and you see one elk the whole time and you come home. You don't want that either. But that's where I feel like this is empowering because you have multiple routes in, you have multiple plans, you have a backup. If this doesn't work, you drive here, you go there, and you have a new plan, and it just opens it up. And like I said before, you know, where we hunt matters, but we use these techniques to find them. And they're all on non-draw tags, really.
And again, you know, there's not one thing in here that's going to be the gym. It's not. There's no shortcuts in elk hunting. Okay. Yeah. I'm just going to be, I'm sure
I bitch about elk hunting all the time.
There's no shortcuts.
I prefer, I love elk hunting, especially, you know, as I'm tagging out more on 6x6 bulls than I've ever done in my life, right? Like I feel like I've kind of overcome
You've arrived.
I've arrived. Like I feel like I'm going to be able to repeat that year. I have got somehow all the ingredients have come together, and now I can kill a 6x6 mature bull year over year over year, you know, with a bow. But it's taken me a long time to get there. And so I feel good about that. But I look at this journey and how long it's taken, and it's been frustrating. But the tools that are here now, a guy can come along with a much, much better learning curve than what I came up through because of podcasts. What about
me? Dude, I came from Missouri.
Yeah.
20 years of driving in a row, 25 years in a row of driving from Missouri out west to elk hunt.
Yeah.
I was addicted to elk hunting day one.
It's funny how they say that hunting is on a decrease.
It is, except not big game.
And I'm like, perhaps.
Not out here.
It ain't out west. No. I'm having every year it's getting harder and harder to just get the over-the-counter tags. I mean, a few years ago, I was able to get 2 deer tags in one state over the counter. Now I'm lucky if I get 1.
Yeah. And Montana, you can't.
Montana, I can't even get the tags.
You can't hunt every year now.
I know.
I mean, it's not a thing anymore. And Idaho now is out. No,
Idaho,
either.
Utah, they're all getting tighter and tougher.
So getting a tag, job one, but then, guys, it's about cutting the learning curve down, like we just talked about. But it's more importantly than cutting the learning curve down, it's multiplying the odds.
Yeah.
I talk about that in the course till I think people are tired of me here saying it, but I just want to make sure it's almost the number one takeaway of the entire course is to multiply your odds, not go with the base. If you go with the basic odds, you're going to kill an elk about once every maybe 10 years if you're lucky.
Right. Yeah.
The non-resident, can you imagine what the success rate is? They don't even publish this, but for non-resident elk hunters on public land, do-it-yourself hunts, it's got to be under 10%.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
It's under 10.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if
they have fun and they're still flinging arrows and it's still a hunt, but
nothing wrong with it,
success is not very high.
My goal is to, now maybe it ain't going to be every year. We're not going to guarantee anything like that, but what we got to try to do as elk hunters, or what we want to try to do, is cut those odds, maybe double those odds, maybe triple those odds.
Right.
I mean, tripling still only 30%.
Yeah.
So I guess what I'm saying is I wish 30 years ago, Brian, something like this would have existed.
Yeah.
I wish somebody would have told me a few things. So I just wanted to share it. I mean, I get some hate mail. I'll be honest.
Yeah.
Some guys are like, why in the world would you pass this? Tell everybody this.
Sure.
But I'm like, why not?
I get the same thing. I have a podcast that tries to empower people to be more
come out west. And why are you encouraging more people? I'm sure you get it.
I feel like, I understand that sentiment, but the reality is the more people that are passionate about public lands, the more people that love hunting, that adopt it into their life, that care about where their meat comes from and so forth.
Well, then the more people are going to be willing to try to protect it when it gets challenged.
Exactly. There's a way of life that people have to care about if they're going to invest in protecting it. So I think it's just something you got to share. You got to just be willing to share it. It doesn't mean though that, we just find ways to overcome that. We find a spot, like what you're doing, teaching, that we get into where we don't have to share it with very many people.
Yeah.
It can be done. So folks, hope you liked that one. And like I said, tune in to the next podcast. We're going to cover meadows and feeding zones, an elk finding feature, right?
Yeah. The first one.
Yeah. All right.
We're finally ready to find some elk.
That's right. Thanks, folks. Stay gritty.